Seattle Seahawks roster projection on today's show. Before we get into the 53 players, a couple of notes. One, it is still 53. I know you might have seen 55 floated out there. It's really a 53-man roster with the ability to promote 2 practice squad players if desired. Now, last year, that number for the practice squad was 10. It was supposed to be 12, but because of COVID, it's now 16. So, of the 80-man roster between the 16 and the 53, most of these guys could be on the roster in some capacity. One significant note, though, the lack of a preseason, that hurts first-year players, that hurts undrafted free agents, and that is a big reason why I only went with 2 quarterbacks. And you can make a good argument that maybe you're better off going 3. No one drafted Anthony Gordon, who I am a big fan of. As you'll see at the end of the video when we break down my practice squad, I do think you will be able to sneak Gordon onto the practice squad. So once again for Seattle, I'm going a little bit lighter at the quarterback spot because you have one of the best in the NFL in Russell Wilson. Which reminds me, I know many of you are already on board with this. It's time to let Russ cook. So I want every single one of you in the comments to spam, even multiple times if you want, hashtag let Russ cook, because if Seattle wants to win the Super Bowl, it's time to let Russell Wilson air it out, and not just in the fourth quarter, in the entire game. I'm going to have Seattle go deep at running back because, well, that's just what Seattle often does. Now, one note, I'm going to project Rashad Penny to start the year on the PUP list, so he'll miss some time. So he doesn't actually count against the 53-man roster for the time being. That leaves Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde, Nick Bellore as the fullback, by the way. I'll also make room for DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. Once Penny comes back, or even if he's going to go week 1, you might have to try and get one of those guys, probably Travis Homer over DJ Dallas in the practice squad if Penny is able to go. Now, there are still a whole bunch of Seahawks masks available, and if we want an NFL season, because we're not getting the Pac-12 one, you should probably be wearing a mask. Chatsports.com/Seahawks mask. Producer Brett didn't want me taking a shot at the Pac-12, saying it's too soon. It wasn't soon enough. That was the main problem there. There is a ton of variety, individuals up to 4-packs, bunch of different colors and schemes and fonts, players' masks, anything you could possibly want. It's at chatsports.com/Seahawks masks. Check the comments and the description. That link is in there. Wide receiver, shoot or shoot, baby. I'm going to project Josh Gordon. No, he's not on the roster. But you know what? No cowards allowed here until later on in the video that you'll see in just a little bit. I think there's a very good chance that Gordon ends up signing with the Seattle Seahawks, assuming, of course, he is reinstated. It makes perfect sense for both sides. He knows the organization. The team likes him. He fits with Russ Wilson. I think it makes more sense than Antonio Brown. That makes Gordon your wide receiver 3. You've got Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I'll include Philip Dorsett. I'll also include David Moore, who I think you might something similar to what happened to Brandon Jackson, of they release him at roster cuts and then bring him back at a cheaper salary, and I'll include John Rosura as a potential future slot guy as my 6th receiver for Seattle. But do you agree with me? Do you think the Seattle Seahawks will end up signing Josh Gordon? I am going to make this the pinned comment on today's video. So if you get the ad break here on YouTube, I want you to scroll down and cast your votes. Type Y for yes or type N for no. To tight end now, and I'm going to go 4 deep on this one. Greg Olsen, Will Dissly, Jacob Hollister, who also might get the David Moore treatment of cut and then brought back at a cheaper salary. And then Colby Parkinson, who wasn't put on the PUP list to start camp, which I think means Seattle thinks he might be good to go in week 1 as a 4th-round pick. I think he's going to end up making this team. Hollister, though, is the one I struggled with. I thought about Luke Wilson. I went younger and I think better, even though he is more expensive. But what would you do with him? Would you keep him? Type K. Would you cut him? Type C. Would you trade for him? Well, then type T, or trade him away, I should say. Maybe you cut him and then bring him back. I'm going to include that as keep, because that's what I did here with Hollister. But let me know what you guys think. All right, offensive line time, and maybe one noteworthy option is not including Jordan Simmons. We'll talk about him on the practice squad. Dwayne Brown, Ayupati, Finney, Lewis, Shell, Obwehi, who's bad, Posick, Phil Haynes, and Jamarco Jones. Is it the best offensive line? No. Is it good enough? I think so with Wilson at quarterback. All right, the defensive line here. Those a couple of obvious choices, right? L.J. Collier, Poona Ford, Reed, Irvin, Taylor, Rasheem Green. I went with Benson Mayowa and Alton Robinson, so I went heavier at defensive end and lighter at defensive tackle because Green and Collier, and I think even maybe Alton Robinson down the road, they can shift inside the defensive tackle if needed. I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle added somebody to this unit. Maybe it's a Damon Harrison. Maybe they explore the much rumored Clay Matthews or Everson Griffin. Because I'm not that confident in this Seahawks pass rush. In terms of the biggest needs on this team, I think it is another edge rusher. But let me know what you guys think. What is the confidence level in the pass rush? I've seen some high numbers for you guys. I don't think it should be in the 7 range. I think this is maybe more of a 5. But let me know what you think in the comments section. All right, I'm not confident in the pass rush, but I am confident in this linebacking core. KJ Wright, Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks, some great depth in Ben Burke-Irvin, Cody Barton, and Shaquem Griffin. You could even see Bruce Irvin get some strong side linebacker snaps, but I think he's more of a pass rusher at this stage in his NFL career. I would argue Seattle has the best linebacking core in the NFL, and frankly, I don't even think it's that close. If you agree with me, I want you to type in 1. If you disagree, I am very surprised that this is a Seattle Seahawks show, but type in 2 for no. And if you're typing in 2, let me know which team you think is better at the linebacker spot. I think it's pretty clearly Seattle. All right, over now to the secondary. I want to mention DJ Reed, recently claimed. I'm actually a big fan of his. He's either going to be a PUP list candidate or maybe even outright IR, but I did want to make note of him. It does not count on that 53-man roster limit. You got Griffin, you got Dunbar. I went with Trey Flowers here, Ugo Amadi, and Nico Thorpe. Maybe they explore one more option. Maybe you see Marquise Blair, the safety, battle the nickel corner role for Amadi. Maybe Dunbar shifts over there and Flowers starts. You got some options there, but with the addition of Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs in trades, and Quentin Dunbar, 3 starters you've traded for in the past calendar year, Seattle secondary is back headed in the correct direction. Special teams, look, this is really no surprise whatsoever. Jason Myers is your kicker, Michael Dixon's your punter, Tyler Otts your long snapper. Those guys are locked and loaded. That one's pretty darn obvious. Now, the practice squad this year is going to be bigger. Again, 16 players will break down my list here, but I am curious who you want to sneak onto the practice squad this year. For me, the biggest guy, and I think by a pretty good margin because I was a huge fan of his, relatively speaking, coming out of the NFL draft, is Anthony Gordon. I think you'll be able to. No one drafted him, so I don't think anyone's going to sign him unless there's a rash of injuries or illnesses at the quarterback spot. So he's my first player. I'll go 3 deep at receiver, Freddie Swain, who they drafted, Penny Hart, Cody Thompson, so you got some options there. I will include Steven Sullivan as well, who is kind of that almost tight end receiver hybrid. I have some hope for him as well. Offensive line, Jordan Simmons almost made my list. You Seattle fans know him pretty well. He's the most noteworthy guy there between Kyle Fuller and Chad Wheeler. Defensive line, I'll go Brian Monet, who I think could make some noise. I almost put Brandon Jackson on that list, but I was already 10 deep on the defensive line, and I wanted a true defensive line. That's why I went with DeMarcus Christmas instead, but he's certainly in the mix for the 53-man roster. Marcus Webb is also an undrafted free agent, just like Yama Siverande, the safety, really more special teams guy out of Oklahoma State. And then I went heavy in the secondary as well because, well, I was going to put Brian Allen on here and maybe Anthony Jones, and those guys both got cut yesterday. So you don't have that many other options available. So I went with Renfro and Miller and Neal and Stevens. Lyndon Stevens is the one that really jumps out to me. But Seattle, since I only had them going 9 deep in the secondary, I went a little bit heavier on the practice squad.